Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. Alright, so this is going to be a short episode, not a lot to talk about in terms of news, and not that much to talk about in terms of what I watched this week or what I read this week, so let's just start off with something light, as we have the first actual footage from the Umbrella Academy Season 2 in the form of a new trailer. And it seems like basically the first season again, and what I mean by that is that once again the team has a few days to stop the apocalypse and are being hunted by the Time Police. Again, and it's a shame because it's also just throwing out the entirety of what the last season set up. That whole they're living in the past, reliving their childhoods as kids again. That felt interesting, and I was excited to see how they would play off with the cast of child actors who are playing their younger selves. This is just more of the same. It's worse than that, honestly, because it's taking from the Dallas arc of the comic, which is something that was already integrated into the first season. So it's literally just being repetitive. I get that they want to go with what worked last season, and it'll probably be very entertaining, but I feel like this needs to grow and push forward, not play it safe, and this is the definition of playing it safe. Just rehashing and redoing what was popular last time. Overall, I'm still excited. It still looks fun, but fingers crossed that it turns out to be a lot more interesting than it seems. And now on to some really disheartening news. It seems that Stargirl's second season will be a CW original exclusive, no longer being shown on or backed by DC Universe and being fully integrated into the Arrowverse programming block. So that's it for me. I'm dropping it. I knew this was going to happen from the start, but I was honestly holding out hope that the folks who were all, this cross-streaming is just for promotion and to get good word of mouth, could be right. And so much for that. I'm not going to stand here and pretend the show is perfect. It's not. It has a bunch of flaws. But flaws that could have been improved with time and care and standards. But the CW doesn't have standards. In fact, on CW shows, the flaws that I see in this show are seen as benefits, so they'll probably only get worse. I'll stick with the show until the season finale, and then usher it in the DC Universe app out of my life. It no longer has Swamp Thing, it no longer has Doom Patrol, and it no longer has this. So now we can head on to what I read this week. First off, we have Hawkman number 25. And it seems like we're heading straight into the third season with a bang, more or less. It's again a very slight issue of Carter and Shayra fighting. What we get in terms of substance is more of a defined backstory for Shayra back in the original Lifeline, where it turns out that she was a literal angel and that God was planning to wipe out creation and start again until she prodded Carter to changing his ways. And as penance, she is inextricably tied to his fate, which, cool and all, but that's kind of all we get. The rest is just pages and pages of villains monologuing that gets boring and monotonous. It all ends up being something that could have taken 2 or 3 pages max. The real star of this issue is the art by Marco Castiello, who comes off as more of a fluid, less rigid Hitch, and gives everything boldness and weight. There's this blatant one-page spread that's definitely meant to be a Shayra pinup print, and I don't mind that one bit because it looks great, but it just kind of highlights the issue, just sort of over-expanding things just to fill up time. This series is still wafting around with an aimless or rather really rote motions, and that's disappointing because it could be doing so much more, and it has done so much more before. So overall, one thumb middle, one thumb down, and hopefully the series gets some momentum going and it doesn't just rely on having a goal in mind and then stalling until it gets there. The last thing I read this week was Captain Ginger, Season 2, Issue number 4. And again, I'll just say, this mini should have started with the second issue, because not only would we have started with a lot more of an interesting inside incident, but we would have been farther along, and that this issue would have had 2 more issues after that, because this issue sets up in terms of the dynamics and conflicts and tension between the cats and the dogs is so much more interesting, so much more engaging, and I would have loved it if we had more time with that, if we had more time to build that up and more time to really lay the groundwork for it, because this issue is really heartbreaking and really bittersweet and honestly somewhat heartening in how these 2 cultures interact and how they're trying to sort of feel each other out and the bonds and the sort of distances that they create with each other. And the fact that we only have 1 issue left after this sort of stalls me from getting too invested. I want to be invested, and I am despite all of that, but if there was 1 more issue between that we could really sort of deepen these and sort of dig more into this, I would be a lot more happier. But again, it's a better issue than the last couple. It's a very solid issue, and it has that sort of tragic comic nature to it that made the first season such a success and such a hit for me. It nails that so well, and it rides the line between being a farce, about cats and dogs in space, but also something really humanistic and something that really does touch you and really does sort of gauge up emotionally. So overall, 2 thumbs up. I still had a lot of fun with it, despite my reservations. Now we can head on to what I watched this week. We have Doom Patrol Season 2, Episode 4, Sex Patrol. I can breathe a sigh of relief that HBO Max isn't just burning through these episodes like I feared when they did the 3-episode premiere batch. And it's a good thing too, because this solitary release this week proves that these episodes can still stand their own as satisfying and substantive content. Not everything has to be made to be binged. But setting all that aside, this was a great episode, at least in terms of moving the characters and their arcs forward. It doesn't pull that many punches when it starts to place all the stuff that's been brewing this season or left over from last season under the microscope, with much of the focus being on the team's relationships with and philosophies concerning parenthood. Niles, Cliff, and Larry and their individual responsibilities, failures, and stubbornness with fatherhood, alongside Rita's childhood trauma from mother and repeated and learned missteps. This even perfectly dovetails into Crazy Jane's whole inner conflict that's been the forefront of her scenes in the past 3 episodes. The only real odd man out is Cyborg, whose own arc is only briefly touched upon and is at best negligibly tangential to the themes as a whole. Even Danny the Street is more connected to these themes, given how he fits into Dorothy's life as a substitute parental figure. So yeah, it leads to a whole lot of engaging, impactful, and sorrowful moments that feel earned and dire, sometimes even bittersweet at best, which is just what this show is good at. The only issue is that the more fantastical elements like Danny's party or the sex man stopping a sexpocalypse from a sex demon feel ancillary and like distracting afterthoughts to the meat of the story. They're fun and lively, but they're not well integrated, and the show used to be a lot better at meshing its two sides together to make for a unique experience in terms of viewing. And it just feels like you could have excised those parts of this episode entirely and be left with an episode that is mostly the same and just as good and just as captivating. Still, overall, 2 thumbs up. I'm glad that Doom Patrol still is going strong and that it still has it, because that was something that I was really worried about. And lastly, we have Stargirl episode 7, I think, Shiv part 2. So given all I said at the very beginning of this episode, I won't let that stop my enjoyment of the series for now, as this was still a rather decent episode. Following on from the first part, it maintains a good grasp of what worked about the original comics. Shiv and her father, the Dragon King, remain delightfully entertaining and solidly 90s TV show campish with their scenes. Seriously, Dragon King feels like he stepped out of an episode of Buffy, alongside his layer and foot soldiers. Nothing really compares, and they nail that old school camp goofiness with sincerity. Just to compare, we have a scene with Icicle, and it feels so much more tired and cliche and overused. And again, I'm wondering why we even have Icicle and why we even have the Injustice Society. Aside of that, this is also a stellar episode for Luke Wilson and his character as Pat, because he's pushed to some incredible extremes, straining and boldening his dynamics with the rest of the cast, and it makes for more of an investing storyline. Like, I hope from the outset of the series, the superhero stuff and how much that is putting a strain on the family dynamics is really coming to the forefront. It's really something they're delving into and making sure they tackle. And his relationship with his wife gets into some really fraught and honestly very suspenseful territory, and I'm glad that it's pushing that envelope, that's really sort of getting along headfirst into it and not just sidestepping it or downplaying it. It makes for something that's really captivating. Pat is the perfect avenue for that. Other than that, nothing else in this episode does much to impress. The JSA is still going through the same bland and now very irritating inner conflict, and that's just lingering around. It's something that doesn't feel really earned, it doesn't feel like it fits, and it feels more like it's just there to, again, pad out time, and because they need to be conflicting teenagers that are hot-headed. It's not something that's really that engaging. I just hope it gets resolved before the finale so I can have some semblance of closure before I drop the show. Overall, it's still a really fun show. It's something that is still really well made, and I still have no hope for the CW doing it any justice. Overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. And that's it for this week. I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who's ever sent in a question, comment, or topic. I'm going to ask for questions in a week or 2, so thank you so much for still being around. It means so much to me, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I want to give a shout out to the cover artists for our show at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. They're amazing. They deserve all the support they can get, so please go give them that. They really are fantastic. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and see you again next time.